Experiment in Science, first quarter. Hi classmate and teacher Marvin. I am Xian Pascua from grade 4 section Emerald, and let me discuss to you about physical and chemical change, and later we will do some experiment. Let me tell you first the question we are going to answer. So let's get started. Question: what are the two types of changes in the properties of matter? How they differ to each other? First, let me define what is physical and chemical change and how they differ each other. Physical change. Physical change is something that changes the physical properties of a substance as shape or form. Physical changes include cutting, bending, boiling, melting, freezing, shredding, evaporating, and more. For example, when water changes state from a liquid to a solid or a gas, this is a physical change. How to distinguish a physical change? Changes that gas changes the form or physical appearance of the matter, like change in the shape, size, or form. Do not change the amount of matter in object. Do not form a new substance. Most are physical change reversible, but not all. If enough energy is supplied, many physical change may be reversed. Physical change example: ice formed by freezing and melting and back to original base, which is water. During a physical change, molecules are rearranged, but their internal structure is not affected. Example number 2. White egg does not changes and no substance is produced. Whipping egg whites is physical change. Only air is forced into fluid. No new substance is produced. Example number 3. Dissolving sugar in water is a physical change. Sugar molecules remain the same. They are just dispersed within water. How about a chemical change? A chemical change, the change of one substance into another with a distinct chemical identity, is characterized as a chemical reaction. Chemical change include burning, frying, rusting, and decaying. Chemical change. A chemical change occurs when two substances interact to form a new chemical bond. This union results in a new substance, and it cannot return to its original state. For example, when iron rusts, the rust is a new substance, and this change cannot be undone. Another example is food rotting. Once food rots, it cannot change back to the way it was before. A chemical change alters the composition of the substance. When the two original substances undergo a chemical reaction to become a new substance. Way to distinguish chemical change. A new physical properties is produced after a chemical change. A new physical properties is produced after a chemical change. Create sound, produce light, change in color of substance. may absorb or release heat or changes in temperature, release or produce odor or some smell, create sound or produce light. Some gas is produced or released. You notice odor or bubble. Precipitate. Form liquid plus liquid equals solid. A chemical change cannot be reversed. Example of chemical change. Frying an egg. It leads to form of a new types of matter that may look totally different from the original matter. Another example of chemical change are storing milk, digesting food, cooking an egg, heating sugar to form a caramel, baking a cake, fireworks, bleaching, rusting of iron. Learning sources. Those are learning sources that we have from the internet. Link listed here. Hypothesis. What are the physical and chemical changes of an apple? Is cutting or slicing an apple considered a chemical change or a physical change? When an apple exposed to air and turned brown, what changes applied? Let us do some experiment. Let me state first our hypothesis. Materials needed in cutting or slicing of an apple. Procedures in cutting an apple, and let us wait more minute to turn the apple to brown. Lastly, the conclusion that we have after doing the experiment. Hypothesis. To determine whether cutting or slicing of an apple is a physical or chemical change. When apple turns to brown, what changes applied? To know also the physical and chemical change of an apple. To determine whether an apple is a physical or chemical changes, it is important to understand the properties of physical and chemical changes. A physical change has an effect on a substance, physical properties, while a chemical change will impact a substance's chemical properties. Cutting of an apple is a chemical physical change as only the shape and size of apple is changed. If you cut an apple and keep the color changes to brown, after example, this is chemical change. Apples and other fruit will turn brown when they are cut, and the enzyme contained in the fruit, tyrosinase, and other substance iron-containing phenols are exposed to oxygen and the air. The purpose of this chemistry laboratory exercise is to browning of an apple when they are cut, and then enzyme inside them are exposed to oxygen. A possible hypothesis for this experiment would be fruit turns brown when exposed to air because a reaction is happening when a cut pieces of fruit is exposed to oxygen. This is called enzymatic browning. The name enzymatic browning comes from the fact that an enzyme located in the fruit reacts with oxygen from the air to turn our fruit brown. Now let's get to the experiment that will test the apple browning experiment hypothesis. Materials. We need the following: a piece of the pressed apple, of a knife, cutting board, small container. Procedure. First, place an apple on a cutting board with the stem passing up. Using a sharp knife, make a cut 1/2 inch to the right or left or the stem and cut all of the way down. Pay close attention to avoid the core. Turn the apple 90 degrees and make a similar cut all of the way out the apple. Place apple on a clean plate. Place a few minutes. Wait a few minutes. Observe the apple slices and record your observation. It may be helpful to make table listing the apple slice treatment in one column and the appearance of the apple in the another column. Record your weather of your observe such as the extent of browning, white, lighty brown, berry brown, pink, the texture of the apple, dry, slimy, and any characteristic, smooth, print, odor, etc. If you can, you may want to take photograph of your apple slices to support your observation and for future reference. You may dispose of your apple once you have recorded the data. Experiment. In this apple oxidation experiment, we are going to explore the chemical reaction that turned the apple brown. This is a great experiment through the scientific method of making an observation, asking a question, forming a hypothesis, designing an experiment, analyzing the data, and forming a conclusion. Cutting of an apple. It also physical change as only the shape and size of the apple is changed, but exposing apple to air. Wait for some minutes. We have our sample here. Apple turns to brown. When you understand the differences between these two changes, physical and chemical changes, it will be easier to identify the types of changes that occur. The apple turns brown when you slice it open and leave out. Cutting of an apple is physical as only the shape and size of the apple is changed, but when it turned into color brown after exposing to air, is it a chemical change? Therefore, the answer to the question, cutting or slicing of an apple is physical change. While it turns to brown after exposing to air, a chemical change happens. Fresh cut apples turn brown when iron-containing chemical inside the apple cells react with oxygen in the air. When an apple is injured or cut into pieces, the plant tissue is exposed to oxygen. The chemical reaction is called oxidation. This triggers an enzyme that regulates oxidation in an apple is called polyphenol oxidase, PPO, also known as tyrosinase, or wait for it, oxidized polyphenols in the apple pressed. This results in new chemical oxinones, which then react with amino acids to produce brown colored Melanin.